Hello and welcome to Assemblies of the World with me, Anna Isabel. And my guest today, I am very happy to say, is Hans-Gunther Kern. Hello, Hans-Gunther.
Hey, and Isabel, and everyone out there in the big wide world who's going to listen to this. Very honored to be here and great delight to share with you today more about what we're doing with growing food and how we can learn it and what benefits that all has.
You, you are a biodynamics, and I'm going to use the word expert because you are a teacher. And you have holistic living, which provides courses. So maybe it would be good to start with what the principles of biodynamics are in terms of growing, and
Yeah,
then you can tell us about holistic living and the courses that you are running.
great. Very delighted to do that. So for most of us are familiar who have any connection with nature that growing food was always a mainstay of society, and lots of people were involved in growing traditionally food, even in their back gardens or their home gardens or in their communities. And a lot of it has been outsourced. And traditional farming and gardening really is the basis, I would say, for 80 to 90% of what we're doing, what we call biodynamic farming and gardening. Biodynamic as a word has been created after Rudolf Steiner in 1924 gave his lecture cycle of 8 lectures. After a lot of research he did in the modern sciences as they were then, 100 years ago, about meteorology, about soil science, about botany, about climatology, about pest diseases and the influences of the stars, and they did vigilant study for 6 years in a bunker in Stuttgart, which is my hometown, to find out what the influences of the moon and the planets are on plants, and how you can potentize certain substances to improve the growing of plants. And in isolation, total scientific research on the one hand, which we call natural scientific research, and then he did, on the other hand, add to what is traditional farming, gardening, and that natural research which was at hand through natural science, spiritual science. And with spiritual science, he really only what he added was to use our thinking in a way, use our remembering, our imagination, our inspiration, and our intuition again in a way that we control our thinking, that it becomes a true observer of nature. And what we do then is through that we can read between the lines, just like you pick up between the black letters of the words that are written on a page, you pick up the meaning behind the letters. And there's nothing else that Steiner did, is he, between the different expressions of growth of plants, etc., he really put the dots together and he found out the meaning and the life processes behind things. And we integrate that all in biodynamics. So, in a practical way speaking, we have now homeopathic solutions for weed and pest control, just like humans have homeopathy. We have working with rhythms, like we know from human health and medicine nowadays, complementary medicine, we work with diurnal rhythms. We don't just work with diurnal rhythms, we work also, or circadian rhythms as they're also called, we work also with the moon rhythms, we work with the sun rhythms, and we work with the different planetary rhythms in biodynamics. So depending how much advancement you have in your studies, and I can probably pride myself enough to say I've sort of mastered most of those studies, and yet I have to say, you'd be surprised, I know nothing. Because we're learning through applying it, and the biggest teacher is application and the assistance of that application through teachers or elders or experienced gardeners in what we do. So in biodynamics, we have also herbal remedies that I would call alchemical healers for regenerating soils and healing soils and also directing plant growth. So it becomes more nutritious, it keeps longer, and it becomes more resilient to climate change and also to pests and diseases. So that's in a nutshell maybe how I could summarize biodynamics practically.
And listening to you, and talking about how Rudolf Steiner came to the understanding that he did. It's only yesterday I was interviewing a herbalist for my astrology channel, and he was talking about how this was for medical astrology and the different humors and understanding the humors, etc., and how that was rooted in nature and how our ancestors would have noticed similarities between the seasons and a person's temperament, and then how that translated into the linking that to different parts of the body, etc. And essentially that is exactly what you're talking about here, is observing nature to learn from nature and how to work with nature, but then understanding that there's an extra component, which is the interconnectedness of everything, and how everything has something to teach us. Nature has something to teach us. And so through observation, we can begin to make connections, make links, and increase our understanding in a way that we might not consider to be the norm in modern times. So this is I think, a beautiful way of looking at the world, where everything is relevant and everything has something to teach. So this is in a biodynamics in a very small nutshell.
Yeah.
And you have this wonderful organization or teaching called Holistic Living, and you are constantly, it seems, teaching and providing courses. And the reason I asked you if you would come and do an interview is because on the Farmers Forum recently, we highlighted the fact that we're noticing a number of people are wanting to grow their own food, take up gardening, or in some cases, buying land to do something with, even just that instinct to buy the land and then think, okay, what am I going to do now?
That's it. Yeah.
And and you were talking about how some of your courses are designed to help people exactly in those situations. So tell us about those courses.
Yeah, so this has really developed out of my own training, the way I was trained at Emerson College 47 years ago now, where we basically had a full year course in the college where I was studying and then subsequently teaching. And we covered every area of biodynamics, and as I said earlier, the practical side, that's so important in training people, and to then have the right questions out of practice, not out of intellectually contrived questions, but like you said, out of observation, connecting, seeing the interrelationships, and then going, is that really a relationship that's a correlation, or is it, is it factual? Is it something I contrive in my mind? But when you work every day with plants, the practical side of 2/3 of practice and 1/3 of study, research, experimentation, conversation with other people who might have had more experience than me, or other learners that might have very fundamental and basic questions. We used to bring that together in a course that was a year course, an international, where we had 20 odd year olds up to 60s, all mixed up, all different nations, different cultures, different religious backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and different experiences in terms of beginners, intermediate, and advanced learners. And it was the most comprehensive course I've ever experienced in my life, I must say. And so after teaching these courses, which are usually weekend courses, practically 8 modules, where I take people through the year and teach, say, for example, first the introduction, of course, in the autumn, and how to prepare your garden in the autumn, to take people through of understanding the soil, which is one of the limiting and potential growth factors, Mother Earth, and then taking people into understanding from there how to create the fertility or how to heal the soils. And then we take them through the whole aspect of creating our own soil mixes, the nursery work, to raise our seedlings and understand what the different plants need that we want to grow like vegetables, flowers, and herbs. And then we're going into when the first growth is starting happening, we have started having green materials for composting. So we teach them composting, which is the next workshop coming up, practically speaking. And then also I do this online, which I can mention in a moment. But the practical one always accompanies in the season exactly what's needed in the season, so people are prepared to do their own work and research and experimenting at home in their own gardens or in the community garden where they work. And then after the composting, of course, there's this whole question, how do we arrange plants in the garden in spring through crop rotation, companion planting, interplanting, and then to curtail and prevent pests and diseases, which we call pests and diseases. Animals, fauna and flora that usually is present, but when it becomes dominant, it becomes a pest and disease. And there we teach them, of course, the homeopathic methods of biodynamics, how to deal with weeds and with pests and diseases. And then we have the whole preparation work that's integrated throughout the year, making preparations, the different ones that enhance the soil fertility, that helps plants to ripen and become more resilient. The compost preparations that create the best plant educator, I will call it, and the best soil quality for the garden, because the compost is not a fertilizer. The compost is informing the soil of all the qualities that the garden has taken up in the year, and then you put it out there again after another year, where it was exposed to the cosmos and the earth and has gone through the evolutionary process. So it's really this combination of having compost, companion planting, and then you have prevention of pests and diseases is really a pinnacle in May when most of these things start happening. And then you have summer. It's really taking people through planning the autumn garden and then looking also at how to maintain your garden, how to, keep weeding, fertilizing the plants or the soil, and also foliar application. And then you go into the summer where then the plants start going to seed. We're doing seed reproduction. And then in the autumn, the harvest, the bounty, and how to store, how to ferment, and how to preserve. And what are the best methods to get our vegetables through the winter? So that's, in a nutshell, 8 modules, which are on the internet. On the online course are 38 sessions plus 38 Q&A sessions. So 76 sessions we do all throughout the year, accompanying people every week through the garden and with a WhatsApp forum where all the community interacts and brings their questions and answers and explores together, not just gardening but also health.
I would hazard a guess that slugs and snails are high up on that question.
Not this year.
Q&A.
Because it's going to be a very dry spring, and
Well,
it's
it feels
been
like
very dry.
Yeah, it feels like it's been it's helpful, isn't it, when you to have a dry spot when your plants are really, really young, because when it's wet, out they come and decimation follows in my experience.
Hell is loose when it's too wet, like the last 2 winters. Yeah, absolutely. But this spring we'll be dealing with a lot of flea beetles, with aphids, and possibly also some fungal attacks around full moon. So be prepared. And that's what we prepare people for, to prevent that, rather than deal with remediating it and then falling behind and losing plants.
So if somebody wanted to start now, because the courses are online, can they start at any point, or is there a start date?
The course is both in the practice and in the online platform. It's modular. So right now we're moving into composting and companion planting, crop rotation, and pests and diseases and so on for this module 5 that we just started. But it's Easter holidays, so we observe the school holidays. So we really start after the school holidays, after Easter with that. And then we do the same in a practical course here in Sussex and in Ringwood, Hampshire, where I teach it on the ground and show people the practical applications of it myself and instruct them.
And do you have people dotted about different parts of the country who are offering a kind of mentoring, practical teaching?
So that's the next step that we're looking to develop. And also just to say that there are quite a lot of other organizations that offer also biodynamic introductory courses, not as profound as what I'm doing, because it's really bringing introduction and intermediate and advanced learners together. But there's, for example, a step-by-step program by Ruskin Mill, which is, I think, held now in 11 or 13 places in Britain. So you can go to the Biodynamic Association UK website and can see where those courses are being held in other areas of Britain, like in Devon and Yorkshire and other places. And I've got some ambassadors that I'm teaching, training, that then will also spearhead things in other areas, but it's really in the making still.
So I'm just thinking,
sorry to interrupt, I'm looking right now for more of those type of people who want to really interact and feel like they're leaders and they can take on that responsibility.
well, there's a call to action.
There's an opportunity.
If you are already gardening in a biodynamic way and you would like to step up, I think Hans-Gunther would love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just thinking back to the fact that this is, I think, the beginning of module 6, you said.
5.
Module 5. So if it's the beginning of module 5, does that mean that people can't join now, or can they join now because everything is set up for the season, and so you're working with this season and there isn't any real need for knowledge from what came before? It's specific to the season.
It's very specific to the subject, and I'm working very hard, and I had practice on creating these calendars. So we've got some wall calendars, the 100-year calendar, and also I call it now the 101, which is the latest calendar, where I was asked to put everything that I'm teaching into a nutshell so a 3-year-old can understand it. And so I've learned being very descriptive and very, fundamental, use basic language. Instead of like a lot of biodynamic work or work that comes out of Steiner, it uses a lot of jargon going back to the esoteric side of things. And it's much more practically orientated, and so people can actually digest it easily. Don't have to have previous knowledge of, like if somebody studies the biodynamic agriculture lectures, because they're interested in biodynamics, I would say, be careful, don't get disappointed, because you will only understand half, because a lot of it is without pre-study of anthroposophy, which is Steiner's world conception, and the jargon that's there, which was given to the people in Germany who were anthroposophists for many years. You will only understand half or a quarter, unless you have a study group, where this is being offered in many places in Britain, where you can find study groups and study the agriculture lectures. So this is very practically based, so very much from the ground up, grassroots, as it were.
So here's a thought that's just come to my mind, because we're talking about plants specifically. But what about for those who would like to have animals, a small holding, including chickens, pigs, whatever they can? Would there be a biodynamic approach to looking after the animals as well?
Absolutely. And I must refer the people there to people who work with animal husbandry. I've got a colleague who is a consultant who helps people with that. I can help with small animal husbandry and consultancy, except chickens, because I never kept chickens in my life, only ducks, pigs, sheep, goats. That's it, small animals. And that's really nice for people who start because they're easier to keep than cows or horses or what have you.
Hmm.
They need less, care or less area of land also because they're smaller. And they give you
I
much more return per acreage than a big animal, for example.
I was also thinking suddenly of bees as well, beekeeping. Would
So beekeeping, we've got someone on board in our online course. He's been with us for 3 years and he's contributing constantly on our WhatsApp forum about bees and anything pertaining to bees because he's an exquisite beekeeper and he's definitely one of our ambassadors who can help with bees.
fantastic. Well, I mean that's a wealth of information.
Yeah.
So let's imagine that I decide I'm going to buy a few acres, maybe 2, 3 acres of
Yeah.
land, and I'm standing there looking at this land, thinking, "Oh, where do I start?" Um, or even before that, let's say I'm looking for some land.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking for land, what should I be looking for? Should I be, what questions should I be asking
There you go.
the
That's it.
vendors?
Yeah. So when you say questions to the vendors, the first question really you need to ask yourself, and I always tell this to students, they say, how much compost do I apply to this, this garden? And I say, for which crop, at which time of year, for which purpose, and which kind of vegetables, which family, because you need to know specifically. So in your case, in your question, I would ask back to you, what's the purpose of buying this land? Is it just a retreat for you to retire to and have little work to do and low maintenance? Is it a place where you want to create a self-sufficient food production for yourself? Is it a place where you want to create not just self-sufficiency in food production, but also income from the place? Are you interested to do that for a market that's external, or do you want to bring people on the land so it becomes communal? And then now you can start really seeing what kind of land and property and assets you might need to manifest those different kind of ways of going to the land.
So, given that a lot of people at the moment are buying land because they want to be self-sufficient,
Yeah.
so what would they be looking for? So, what questions would they be asking the vendor? There's, 2, 3 acres available, and it all looks really good, but never done this before. What should I be asking the person who's selling?
One essential part is always the question, even where in England, what about water? Where does the water come from? Have you got spring? Have you got a well? Have you got, access to water? Is there running water? Is there a lake where you can pump from? What kind of permits are there for water? Because water is the life essence. If the water is not there, there are no biochemical or alchemical life processes. So that's the first one. And of course, with that, you want to ask, do you know how much rainfall you've got? Because if you're in Norfolk, in the lee side of London, you get 200 to 300 millimeters of rain. And if you're on the west side of London, you get 800 to 1,000 millimeters of rain. So a very different ballpark figure. That's 3 times, 4 times more than comparable. Or if you're in Wales, you get even you get like 6 times as much. Or Scotland in the west coast. So you either ask the owners or you go to a meteorological map that you get easily on the internet nowadays to find out about water. Then you want to look at what are the soil conditions. What's the mother rock? What's the bedrock? Is it igneous rock? Is it the oldest rock like granite, basalt, which creates the best soils, the richest soils? Like in Devon, we have that. In Scotland, there are a lot of soils like that, and oft on the islands, and Ireland, also Northern Ireland, for example. Or are you on, alluvial plain where you've got a lot of heavy clay, and you get very heavy soils and waterlogging and no drainage, and then you need to invest a lot in drainage or putting a lot of fertility and organic matter in to create drainage. So that's maybe, as two extremes to look at. And then what's the topography? Is it very steep land? Is it north facing, west, east, south facing? And I would say, if anything, even though I believed in the 1980s I should be north facing because the increased radiation of the sun, which is happening actually, we have more radiation from the sun, I would still go for south facing slopes. And then with the biodynamic method, we can actually balance the extremes with the preparation work, which I wasn't aware of when I was younger. So south sloping, if I want to do vegetable growing, but not more than 7%, or if it's more, then you have to terrace. And then you want to know if you're interested in fruit trees, for example, you want maybe southwest facing land, So what's the topography? And then of course your assets, are they central to the whole farm? Are they on the side? Because farming is a lot of work, and if you have a lot of traffic going back and forth by foot to your animals or to your fields or what have you, is the good soil close to the house? Is it far away? Is there forest? I would always look for forest and hedges if I would look for a farm setup or a self-sufficiency setup. Sort of protection. Is there wind protection, particularly from the cold winds in the north and the east, like we are experiencing now this spring? It's going to be very, very important to have hedges and trees on the northeastern side of the property. And then the southwesterly winds are strong. So is there wind protection there? Is the place totally shaded? Is it sun-filled? Those are sort of basic questions.
Well, that's excellent. Now, let's assume that I haven't asked any of these questions, but I've got the land.
Yeah.
And so now I need to do a little bit of research as to what I've got, the soil type, and as you say, the bedrock, and think about creating shelter where there isn't, etc.
Yeah.
For people who, let's say, so we do see a lot of agricultural land on sale. Not all of it has water or access to water.
Yeah.
Is that a complete loss? Because I imagine that if you're in the southwest of England or in Cornwall, that's going to be less of an issue than if you are in other parts of the country, but you are shaking your head.
I was flabbergasted when 2 years running the fields in Devon were brown from drought. And the only month they started recovering after 3-4 months of being brown was in October, November.
I'm so sorry. I lost you there for, I don't know, about 30 seconds.
Okay.
So you said I was flabbergasted.
Yes, that in Devon we had a drought 2 years running for 2 to 3 months, with the fields turning brown and grass dying back, no fodder for the animals. And it only came back in October, November and greened again.
When was this?
5. There were 2 years ago and 3 years ago. So not, what's it, last year? The year before last.
Gosh.
And the year before, because we had 2 really wet springs, and we had really, particularly lockdown, really dry springs. 3 dry springs and then 2 years with dry summers. Very little rain, particularly in the West Country, in Cornwall and Devon. Everything went brown.
Now there you are.
You can't, I would say with climate change, you really have to be prepared for the worst. Heavier winds, heavier downpours, droughts, damp, like no light for, like we had last 2 years, no light really, bad light for months on end, no light. So you have to make up for that, which we do with our quartz crystals, which I don't have it here right now to show, but was there before? No?
Because we know, of course, that the cloud seeding that's going on with the geoengineering that is being done, we have had very, very little and very poor light in the last couple of years. Last year particularly was awful,
Yeah.
and so was this winter.
And there are volcanic activities. There's a combination of things that happen. The humans make it worse because they accentuate what's happening already and they piggyback on the bad stuff that's happening. So the volcanic eruption 3 years ago put so much moisture in the air that we had 2 really wet years, supposedly. And then they piggybacked on that and made it worse. And the Met Office already declared publicly that they're out of control with the climate geoengineering projects. And even in The Guardian, I saw an article the other day that they declared, this is happening and they don't know what is it going to set off, because they have no clue what's happening. And then you have rocket launching, which destroys the ionosphere. So we get more radiation coming in, and that radiation actually dries out the air. So we have a lot happening right now with sun winds and coronal mass ejections and galactic proton storms that are hitting the Earth and creating this weather right now, for example, here in England.
Okay, so there's clearly that a lot that's out of our control, which is why you're
Exactly.
saying, if you are in a situation where you are buying land, these are the things to consider, because you want to stack the odds in your favor as much as possible.
Yeah.
And if you have already bought land,
Yeah.
but you are in a situation where that's a bit more challenging, like there is no water, perhaps looking for a borehole, to alleviate the situation might be an idea, because what you're saying is water is very important. So,
Yeah.
okay. And because we can't rely on rain, even when it looks like we can rely on rain, we can't always rely on rain. Okay, fine. So if we're now looking at things like the soil condition, actually a question that, because we were talking about the geoengineering that's going on, which of course we know is basically poisoning the air, poisoning the soil, poisoning the water.
Yeah.
Is there something we can do to alleviate or mitigate against this?
Yeah, we do. We can. Before I go to that, just to backtrack one little step, because there are two things with extreme situations of no water. The one is we can alleviate a lot of that problem with biodynamic preparations. I managed to get crops on a sandy soil in Connecticut with 35 degrees every day, no drop of rain, through the drought, without bolting lettuces. And the neighbors were all saying, how can you have lettuces that are not bolting in a drought when all our lettuces are bolting? I said, biodynamic preparations. I had no irrigation system in the first year, pure sand. And I had put compost on. So the next thing is we build water holding capacity in the soil through compost. If we're on a slight sloping land, we do water management through stormwater drains, ditches, that collect the water in ponds, that then we have pond water available both for the wildlife to rewild and also for our irrigation systems. So there are ways to mitigate this. It's just some are short-term solutions, build over areas collecting water. Then you create situations on the land to collect water and preserve and do water conservation. And then in terms of the quality, that's a whole nother question then. If you start now energizing the water like we're doing with stirring the water in vortex fashion, and we're creating, integrating filter systems that energize and restructure the water, the plants get away with less water.
Because the quality of the water is better. And so
improving the quality. So before we look at the bad side of, the destruction of everything, let's look how we can improve quality. And then you have structured water that also structured soil, creating soil structure through humus fertility building. You then lock up the contaminants in that structure, that it's only released in very small quantities or not at all when the plants are looking through the microlife actually for the food that they really need, because they're tuned into what they really need rather than the rubbish.
Now you see,
television channels, you know?
Yeah.
If I'm
So
addicted to a television channel, I keep tuning into that station. But if I know I'm looking for something qualitatively good to entertain me with something qualitatively highly informative, say a documentary, then I tune into that channel. And the same happens in nature with different frequencies in consciousness.
see, now I am imagining lots of people watching this who have been kind of quietly holding their heads in despair,
Yeah.
thinking about, no matter how hard I work, everything's poisoned. And you're going, oh, don't worry. Yeah, that's true. But there are things you can do. And so this is hope, and it is exciting and very inspiring. You
Could I give
talking
one more
about,
example? Sorry to interrupt. Could I give one more example which is even more pertinent? In Germany, we're breeding seed biodynamically that's grown under 220,000 volt electromagnetic fields, the overhead wires. Why? We're giving them biodynamic preparations to go through that field and connect with the cosmic truth, so to speak, with the cosmic true information, so they can supersede the veil that's put around us through electromagnetic pollution, through other pollution, and they can penetrate through that and still receive the information they need and also the nutrition they need through that. The same is true for us. We can do the same. It's just where focus go, energy flows.
wow, it's a question a moment in every moment as I listen to you speak. And I'm just wanting to come back to this because, just the thought of plants needing less water because the quality of the water is better. It's a bit like those of us who are eating pasture-fed, really well-reared meat are discovering we don't eat as much as we used to
Correct.
because we don't need to. And I think this is quite an extraordinary thing, and yet it's so obvious that if you give the plants what they need, they're going to need less of it. So that's one thing. Now you're also talking about seeds that are charged to be able to overcome the pollution more, or not be as affected by the pollution of EMFs, etc. And I'm thinking, but we eat those plants. Is that going to help us to be more resilient in the light of all the radiation that's around us?
Plants are nourishing us through light and through information, through frequencies. And if our frequencies and our light starts resonating at those harmonizing frequencies and light frequencies, then we will be healthier and we will not be as affected by the detrimental frequencies that are low energy and low subnatural frequencies. I call those ones the healing ones the supernatural, which is the galactic, intergalactic, universal wisdom that comes through and creates intelligence in the soil through the soil life to give the plants what they really need, who then give it to the animals, who give it to us, or the plants directly to us, depending what we eat. And therefore we are sensitized and harmonized and attuned to the higher frequencies, which are supernatural, or some people call it the 5D world or 6D, away from the 3D, which, is fear, anxiety, doubt, all the lower frequencies and vibrations.
So you've just given us a very strong argument to be looking at animal husbandry in a biodynamic way. Because
Working with homeopathy and all the higher
exactly,
frequencies that we can introduce, that we found in many situations where there was a drought. For example, in Germany, we had in 1976, huge drought. You probably had the same hot summer here. The animals were healthier and better fed from the hay that following winter with less disease than when they had abundant pasture with plenty of rain and plenty of growth the other years. The people in the Second World War were healthier, according to a lot of research that's come out now, with food rationing and eating little than the people who are now overfed. And as Steiner said, we're going to die in front of full plates because they're not nourishing us anymore.
So I can hear lots of people now rushing to actually join up for your courses. But what I think is they also need to know is how much time what's the time commitment? Because many people will be willing, but very short of time. So what is the time commitment?
Well, if you're already a farmer or gardener, the time commitment is that you practice in your garden and in your farm, applying new knowledge and wisdom and experiences that will not cost more time because you're working in a farm already. In terms of investment of time to learn it, you can come to 8 courses, practical courses. That's a day each, so it's 8 days out of your life. If you want to really have something more substantial, which is the WhatsApp group and the either recorded sessions where you can learn in your own time, even with audio recording, and you listen to it when you're working or driving or doing something else, and something monotonous at work, a bit of multitasking, you can learn through the audios, recorded, everything's recorded. Or you can also be in the live sessions, which is once a week for 36 weeks. We do Q&As. And so 36 weeks out of the 52, we meet once a week and observing the school holidays, so you can take off with your children or not come and just do the recorded sessions. It's very easy to access, and price-wise, it's dirt cheap. I'm really wanting everybody to be on there. And sorry, I'm having a video call here from someone else. I turned my phone off, but it's still coming into the computer. Sorry. It's actually one of my best friends, who's one of the best biodynamic gardeners. I should maybe bring him on and you ask him questions. He's from the US.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So this is, it's brilliant, because what you're wanting to do is make everything accessible, and I know how busy the average person is.
Yeah.
So as much as people want to do things, sometimes that consideration of time is a barrier. But this sounds really flexible, and it sounds like people can do it in their own time, and so that seems manageable. Now, we've been talking a lot about soil, and everyone I talk to who is conscientious in whether it's animal husbandry or the growing of plants talks about soil. And it's so obvious, isn't it? Because it's the basis, the foundation on which everything is built. But you, in a previous conversation with you on one of my other channels, and you reminded me of this last night, we're talking about the link between soil health and our gut health.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh yes, that's a big one. How does that work?
Right. In a nutshell, in the organic movement, they used to say, you are what you eat. Now, most people don't see, when they eat vegetables or other food, that the leaves are full with microbes. And usually people sterilize, wash off, whatever, these microbes, and then they lose out on very important nutrition. And that nutrition is actually the RNA, the information DNA of the bacteria and the fungi that inform our gut bacteria to eat the food and digest it properly, because the very bacteria and fungi that are on the leaves, on the surface, when the leaves die, are the ones that are digesting those leaves in the soil. So conventional agriculture sprays them. So when you eat conventional food, and even organic food sometimes, because they use pesticides and fungicides that are natural, but they're into killing. In biodynamics, we're into restoring growing plants stronger so they outgrow pests and diseases as much as we can. And if we use any pesticides or any disease-fighting remedies for fungus or bacteria culture, it's usually horsetail, which in itself is a healing substance. It's a herb that heals inflammatory processes and strengthens the skins and the eyes and everything else. So we're adding always instead of killing. Now, if it's true, what science has found out, that these organisms, which we never thought of, it's so like simple, you know, they digest the leaves when they come into the ground. So they inform our gut bacteria with that RNA of their DNA structure to deal with what comes into the gut. Now, that's one thing. So digestion will be aided. Now, there's a prerequisite. It's not that simple if you eat food from all around the world and it's flown in from Chile and from Spain and from Italy and from Greece and from, you know, God knows where. Then you get a mixed up biome, as it's called, microbiome on the leaves, that confuses your gut what it gets, and it never can build up a rhythm of digesting what you're getting into your body. So that's why I'm saying eat 80% local, and then you can have 20% from around the world. The local food gives you the local consciousness, so your body, your immune system, your social consciousness and your thinking adapts to the culture of your biotope, of your cultural area, agriculture, horticulture, language, human culture, is all related to what's manifesting here in this biotope. And Rudolf Steiner was even wanting to create a Steiner education specific to agricultural, biological biotope areas, which are valleys or certain, you know, areas that have the same climate and the same soils, because the children will learn different if they're nourished by that soil and then they're taught in relationship to the natural environment outdoors, not indoors.
That my mind, you know, is just going whoosh because there's so many threads to that piece of information you've just given us.
Yeah.
Number one.
That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. Number one, we now know that raw honey is really good for us, but especially raw honey from the area, local raw honey.
Correct.
Which could be helpful with hay fever, etc. We also know that this is true of herbal preparations. Correct. That herbs that grow in the area that you're using to make the preparations yourself, yeah, are likely to be more effective than things that are coming even from other parts of the same country. And just a point of example for that is that last year, for the very first time, I made an elderflower syrup because my partner has hay fever. But I didn't collect the elderflower exactly where we were. I collected it round to where a friend lives, because that's where I found it. No effect on him, but her partner, who also had the syrup, all the symptoms gone. And I thought,
the secret.
Oh my goodness.
You discovered an amazing secret, or you know it because you've experienced it. You know?
I'd read about it, but she lives half an hour away. But the difference was very, very marked. And it was made with the elderflower I had collected in her area. So that's really interesting. But now, thinking about what you've just said, the whole business of we know about terroir as a concept, and we have but now we know why that's important as a concept. It's not just because champagne is the best, sparkling wine is the best. You can only call it champagne because it's come from that particular area and that soil. It's more than that. It's to do with the fact that we are intimately connected with our environment to the point where eating what is in our environment, our bodies are going to understand better than things that come from far-flung places. Well,
That's
Hans,
true intelligence. That's what
it
I call
is
true. There's mental, emotional, and physical intelligence, and that's informed by the land and the cosmos. Cheese, just very briefly, French cheese. I mean, why are there so many different types of French cheese? And now you get them, you can buy them anywhere, but they're inoculated by artificial microcultures. Where did the microcultures come from for the cheese or for the good wine and the champagne? From the soil. And that's why you have the different types of cheeses. If you think now of people, if you listen here right now and you've got a allergy to gluten, go to heirloom varieties of grain, have it locally grown, make your own, what's it called, not the mother.
yes,
In Spanish it's called the mother, la
the
madre.
starter,
The starter,
your own starter.
the sourdough starter.
Yeah,
And then have a slow fermentation and a slow bake, and you will find you probably don't have to deal with gluten intolerance anymore. The same, like you said, with the honey, and allergies.
and we know the same thing is true of milk, where people are not
Yes,
eating or not having are having issues with milk, not because milk is inflammatory in and of itself. It's because of the type of milk that everyone is having.
it's the type of milk, it's the fodder they give to the animals, it's the hybrid breeds, it's everything that's to do what goes into the cow and where the cow come from a different area. It's not an heirloom variety of that,
Yeah,
area. It's not a land race, as they call it. It's where it starts. We've estranged ourselves from everything so much that we are all falling chronically ill.
exactly. But you have given us a more than a glimmer of hope, because you have said, yep, all of that's happening, but there are things that we can do.
And that's only a snippet. And if you come to the courses, we go into depth to understand what's behind it, because we're also going to observe. And just imagine for a moment if you could observe that your elder, where you picked it, had a different leaf expression from your elder. That was enough, that difference, in terms of the sacred geometry and the power of the formative forces that come in to reform you differently in that area from here, because behind everything is the sacred geometry.
Indeed. Wow. I think that we have given people a lot to think about,
I hope
and
not too much.
I'm going to be putting a link to your school in the description box. But for anyone who's got a pen and paper and is waiting, how do they find you?
Well, they find me on the website www.whlu, Holistic Living University.org, and also in the Biodynamic website, which is the Biodynamic Association UK, where we have also our courses advertised, or if people are in other areas, they can access other courses. And I'm also on social media, but unfortunately I'm so busy working that I don't have time to mess around with social media. So I have
Yeah.
someone putting some posts there, but it's not worth going there.
No. Well,
It's
thank you.
worth coming to the practical courses and meet me in person.
Thank you. I'm sure that many people will be wanting to do that. Thank you again for your time today.
Bless you, and thank you too. And I send blessings and healing to everybody, because it starts at home and with yourself, each one at a step at a time. Just a step at a time, that's all it needs. And change now, because now is the time we've been waiting for.
There is always no time like the present. So do go and look at Hans-Gunther's website and look at the courses. Hopefully it will help you on your journey to better health and to self-sufficiency, or whether if you are one of those lucky people who has got some land and is wanting to improve what you do, then this is also for you. And on the subject of connecting with other people, do remember that if you have not yet joined CABI, there is a link in the description box. Please do. And if you are, and you are wondering what to do, believe me, you have skills that we all need. So find a local assembly, and if there isn't one, start one. Until next time, goodbye.